20 years ago, I met with the historians, nearly 22 years ago, Ian Clark and Fred Carr. Ian's scars in the landscape and his work collating and editing George Augustus Robinson's journals was foundational work for the study of Aboriginal history in Victoria and in the Western District in particular. Fred Carr has done so much since to comprehensively document the Aboriginal presence in this Wadawurrung country, from first contact to occupation of the land by squatters and then the pre- and post-gold rush history. When I asked Fred back then about Wadawurrung people on the goldfields, he said that they were there. They were all over the diggings, but previous histories had arranged the window of our historical view in such a way that they just could not be seen. But they were there. Despite their absence from most written histories, Fred has scoured an enormous amount of source material to reveal the Wadawurrung men and women who were very present on the Ballarat goldfields. In his books Black Gold and his recent book My Country All Gone, The White Men Have Stolen It, Fred details an extraordinary number of accounts from historical source material of Aboriginal presence on the goldfields and the recurring close interactions with diggers. Recognition has been tardy on the topic, he says. In many instances, monuments, local history publications, and indeed general gold historiography could be accused of selectively culling Aboriginal guides from its point of vision. History is the poorer for it. My friend Ted Ryan, a self-taught Irish speaker from the Mallee and an historian, showed me a newspaper report of the trial of the Crown against Timothy Hayes, one of the 13 diggers for treason. The article describes a witness for the defence by the name of Campbell, who was described in the newspaper reports as a half-caste. The more you look, the more evidence exists that Aboriginal people were all through the Eureka story. There is also a feeling that Aboriginal people were seen sympathetically by many of the diggers on the goldfields as the lords of the land. One of the first things that newly arrived diggers would do was to negotiate with the local Wadawurrung people for a dullong, or possum skin cloak. There was significant trade in these items. Eugene von Gerard's painting, The Barter, records this experience. It shows a European gentleman in a submissive pose on bended knee, probably on the track from Geelong to Ballarat goldfields on the Barwon River, purchasing a possum skin cloak from a local Wadawurrung man who was standing. Aboriginal people were very well paid for these items, apparently between £3 to £5, a considerable sum of money at the time. The significant role Aboriginal people played not only on the goldfields but in every aspect of colonial incursion is now unquestionable thanks to Fred Carr's research. What Carr found were those hidden accounts of Aboriginal people working alongside and integrating with white settlers and vice versa. There's a great story by Antoine Fauchery, the French photographer, wandering through the goldfields, and he sets up to camp one night and cook his dinner. And this Aboriginal fella comes and sits down at his camp and silently and slowly just wears him down, little bread, and he goes, no, I'm not giving you any bread, no, and eventually he just keeps going, just a tiny little bit, and he wears him down, just this much here, and wears him down. And it's a very good-natured and humorous encounter. And of course, they both end up sharing the entire meal and the drink. Fred says that early white settlers acknowledged their reliance on Aboriginal people, but then a veil was drawn when it came to federation. The pastoralists came first in the 1830s, and they wanted occupation of the land. That was a time of two nations warring. There were distinct laws to Wadawurrung people. They had a distinct language. They did not treaty their land, says Fred Carr. We have to concede that the British took it by force. This was a military conquest and there's no getting around it. British military officers fired ship cannons at retreating Wadawurrung, Carr says. This was not a settlement that suggests a civil occupation. The first governor of Victoria was a military officer. There was no legislative house. Men were taking orders. Between 1800 and 1870 on Wadawurrung country, the British came, then the squatters, then the gold seekers. There were countless records acknowledging initially at least the dependency of whitefellas on Aboriginals and a reliance on Aboriginal bioculture. Carr goes on to say that the records acknowledge Aboriginal men were the best workers on the early sheep stations. They could track the sheep better, ride horses better, and took to guns with expert use. And some took to wearing European clothes. They were quick to transform themselves into the society imposed on them. And Carr found interactions of Aboriginal people learning the English language, singing songs with whitefellas, learning where settlers kept their guns, and he said whitefellas would similarly engage with Aboriginal people. Now that Victoria moves closer to becoming the first state to enter formal treaty negotiations with Aboriginal Victorians, such truth-telling of our history is invaluable to give us a truer picture of colonial times. I'd like to think that solid rock may have helped to stoke the coals of a fire for Aboriginal rights nearly 40 years ago, and in some small way prompted people to look further and dig a bit deeper into the true history of our country. I know it made me do that. This country's full of stories. Some of them are ancient and epic Aboriginal stories, and many of them are among the oldest ancient archetypal stories on earth. I don't know whether I can change anyone's mind with a song, but I know that by adding a part of light to the sum of light, hidden things in time may be revealed. I can say with some personal certainty that ideas that were considered fringe and on the periphery 30 or 40 years ago have now drifted into mainstream thinking. What do I think really? Democracy is a fragile thing, and it's not that old. It is tied to our deep notions of justice. It prevents war. The events of January 2021 in the United States remind us of the fragility of our democratic societies. Beliefs are not always shared. The struggle to outlaw slavery was met with fierce resistance for decades and was considered by many, mostly those who stood to profit from it, to be absolutely justifiable, to the point of being defended in the English Parliament and to the letter of the law. Democracy requires vigilance and engagement from us all if we are to avoid despotic governance. That's what happened at Eureka, and we're honour bound to uphold what so many of those people lost their lives creating and defending on December the 3rd, 1854. We should never take it for granted. Inevitably, the voice of the majority draws from minority voices on the fringes that make their way to the centre by strength of argument. The writers, the painters, the poets, the songwriters, all the artists, they paint it, talk it, write it, sing it, and 20 years later it's legislation. Song, music, art, all play a vital role in the mechanics of change, and just as importantly, of holding memory. Like many others, Henry Lawson included, I think the unfinished business begun at Eureka is an Australian Republic. But I also think it would be a hollow reality without a meaningful treaty with the First Nations people of this country. How that will be achieved is a matter for greater minds than mine, but the legal framework for such a possibility is not beyond us. This country was stolen. We know enough now to address truthfully the brutal colonial history of our country. No good can come of such a thing unless we are content to live in a world where the biggest bully rules. Why should we fear our own bold ability to recraft our Constitution and maybe discuss a Bill of Rights? Are these matters beyond the Australian people? I don't think so. We have the opportunity of learning from the successes and failings of a number of models from around the world, as well as our own history, and fashioning our own unique and bold solution in the 21st century, as the men and women of Eureka did before us in the 19th century at Ballarat. There is no reason why the democratic legacy bequeathed to us from Eureka that bound so many different nationalities together in a common cause should not inspire us to further develop a democracy in accord with its First Nations peoples and their deep history of this country, to serve as a beacon of hope in an age of uncertainty, in a troubled world. Out here, nothing changing, not in a hurry anyway. You can feel the endlessness, the coming of the light of day. Talking about a chosen place, we'll sell it in a marketplace. Look out. Just a minute now. Standing on solid rock, standing on sacred ground, living on borrowed time, and the winds of change blowing down the line. Down that rabbit-proof fence, ran about the dawn of time, the dreaming all began. Proud people come, living here in a promised land, running from a heart of darkness, searching for that heart of light. This could be paradise. Yeah, standing on solid rock, standing on sacred ground, living on borrowed time. And the winds had changed, they were blowing cold that night. Standing on the shore one day, water all white sails in the sun. Wasn't long before you felt that sting. White man, white law, white gun. Tell me it's justified. Somewhere, Captain Cook lied. Make it Eureka, Narani, Monte Mil Pagato, Yutukorunka, Narani, Walba Campo, Japarani, Walba Polka Ringani, Pulikumpunka, Narani, Monte Mil Pagato, Yutuirunka, Narani, Walba Campo, Japarani, Walba Polka Ringani, solid rock, standing on sacred ground. The